Here we go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Work-Based Learning Professional Development webinar for ACTE for September 2024. Our topic for today is going to be advocacy as a catalyst for program sustainability. Our presenter is going to be Mr. Stephen Casa, but before we get to that, I have a couple of announcements. If you have not already, registered for our ACTE Work-Based Learning Conference for 2025. We are about to open proposals. Actually, proposals are open. Proposals will be open on October 14th. So be thinking about if there's anything that you would like to present. Definitely get this on your calendar for April 2nd to the 4th. It was great last year and the year before and the year before that, and I know it's going to be great this year as well too. So please consider joining us in Bellevue, Washington for our ACTE Work-Based Learning Conference. Also, we wanted to let you know about our ACT Web Work-Based Learning Division mentoring session. Our next session will be on creating confident coordinators on October 8th at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you would like to register for that, the QR code is right here, as well as our division leader, Ms. Jan Jardine, will also send this out by email to the division members. Our next webinar in October is going to be a little bit different from the norm. We're going to do a resource share. So this will both be us sharing resources that we have used and found useful. It will also be asking you all to bring resources and share them. So our October theme is no tricks, only tips and treats. And we will be sharing all kinds of resources and getting links for you. So it should be a fun event. In November, we will be bringing back Mr. Stephen Casa again, who will be talking about advocacy in a little bit of a deeper dive. We'll be talking about bringing it into action, taking it to that next step, and he will talk to you a little bit about that in his session today. If you would like to go ahead and take a look ahead at some of the topics that we have for this upcoming year, that QR code will help you to just download that whole calendar of events. And I will post this again at the end of the session. So if you can't get your phone out quite yet, just be ready at the end of the session and we will share that link for you then. But without further ado, I am going to be turning it over to Mr. Stephen Casa, who is our supervisor for workplace learning for Ulster, BOCES, in Ulster County, New York. He is also the advocacy chair for our work-based learning division, and he is here to talk to us about all things related to advocacy in work-based learning.
Thank you so much, Sept. I really appreciate it. Hello, everybody. Thank you for spending some time, after 3 o'clock in the Northeast here with me and with us to talk about a really important topic that a lot of folks in education kind of struggle with. It's understandable. It's not something that's the norm. And we're going to talk a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of the tips and tricks and some of the strategies we've used here to be quite successful. But let me just get into this and tell you a little bit about myself. And then I'm actually going to introduce a special guest, which I love when this kind of stuff happens because it's kind of magical and you're going to love this too. My name is Steve Casa. As Sept mentioned, I am the supervisor of workplace learning at Ulster BOCES. People say workplace learning. What's that? It's the same as work-based learning. This is what we call it, right? I mean, titles are titles, right? So my official position is supervisor of workplace learning at Ulster BOCES. I work with a team of 5 work-based learning coordinators and a support person. And we manage all the partner engagement and all the workplace learning efforts here at Ulster BOCES, which is in Ulster County, New York, about 90 miles north of New York City. You could tell by my accent that I originally was born in New York City. I was born in Brooklyn. And we people from Brooklyn actually believe you all have the accents, right? But I've been doing this work for a long time. In 1990, you'll see on my slide here, That's James Madison High School in Brooklyn, New York. Some very famous people graduated from Madison. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Charles Schumer was a senator from New York City, and Andrew Dice Clay, for those of you who remember him, very famous comedian, classic Brooklyn guy. In 1994, I went to Middletown High School in Middletown, New York. When I was at Madison, I actually worked in a program called the Academy of Finance, and that's when this all started for me, like this logic that work-based learning is the answer for young people. It really is. It changes their lives. I've seen it just affect so many. Moved to Middletown, started a program there, and then it was a NAF Academy of Finance. Then I got recruited by NAF to come work for them because our programs were pretty strong, the ones that I ran. And I was with them for 9 years, managed the Northeast region, and then I was actually the network services director, doing this kind of work in big districts around the country that were failing, bringing academies to those districts, really cool work. Then I became the executive director of the National Career Academy Coalition. I did that for 3 years, and then some personal stuff happened with the family member, couldn't travel nationally anymore. So I came to work for Ulster BOCES, a nice, quick 20-minute commute, and life is a little bit easier for me. So that's a little bit about me. If you want to get in touch with me, please hit that QR code. That's my digital business card. It's a cool app called Hi Hello. What it'll do is if you hit that, put it in your phone, you can have my contact info, my cell phone's there. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always available. I believe in this work, and I think it's tremendous. But here's the deal. Forget about me. This is actually fantastic because a special guest just walked in, and I'm going to tell you what happened to lead up to this. A couple of days ago, you're probably all familiar with Skills USA. Skills USA is actually going down. Skills USA leadership is actually going down to DC to advocate this weekend, right?
Yes.
This weekend, and our Skills USA president for our chapter and our area vice president, Bryce Bunton, this guy right here.
Hi, I'm Bryce. I'm part of the aviation program, and I'm the Area 4 Vice President for New York State.
And I kind of love the way this is, like, I just love, he's got great hair compared to me. That's another thing. So, and Bryce actually is going to be leaving tomorrow. And we talked about him possibly just coming and sitting in and listening, which I think will be of value. Gave Bryce a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to see today. Bryce and I talked about a couple of days ago, and these are proof points for advocacy that he'll be able to use. So I'm really glad that he's here with us. I love it when these kinds of things happen. Oh, by the way, here's the deal. This is the way I roll. If you guys have questions, if you have comments, and throw them in the chat, right? Saf and Dana will be monitoring the chat. Please, we're going to try really hard to make this as interactive as it can be. As a webinar, it's a little tricky. And there's a lot of information in this one. This is, again, not a ton of work because you guys got to understand this. You got to understand the value add and how it could be beneficial. So let's dig in a little bit more here, okay? Agenda. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our BOCES and what that is, and give you a little bit of a breakdown on why we have BOCES. We're going to dig into the value of partner engagement, which is the first step to advocacy. You got to have a first step. We'll dig in a little bit more. Then we'll start to do a little bit on what it is, right? And these levels of advocacy. It's really important that you pay attention to that because that's going to be where you will work eventually at the end of the webinar, because this is critical for your advocacy efforts, knowing where you stand on this advocacy continuum, if you will. Data, which is the key in advocacy, and I'll get into that, okay? And then various engagement models, like how do you do it? We're not going to go super deep into that because we're going to do that in November 21st, which I know you're all going to sign up for, and tell your friends. And then I'm going to ask you to just do a little bit of work at the end if you'll be okay. And then I'm going to put you on the spot and ask you to commit to trying something. Does that sound reasonable, folks? Thumbs up if that's cool. All right, good. Let's go. So Ulster BOCES. What is Ulster BOCES? So BOCES stands for Board of Cooperative Educational Services. In New York State, in 1947, BOCES were created to be able to support rural school districts with services that they couldn't provide to their students, right? Every BOCES that's in our area in New York State has a career and technical center, where obviously the CTE programs that many schools can handle happen here at our Korean Tech Center, which is where I'm based. Bryce is in the aviation program here. And we also have a P-Tech school that's part of our BOCES, P-Tech early college, high school, STEM focused. At our BOCES, we have 1,300 young professionals. We don't call them students, by the way. We kind of are trying to nullify a lot of that language, because the fact of the matter is when Bryce graduates, when he leaves this program, he's going to be able to get a job. Now, of course, right, he'll be choice ready, as they say in South Dakota. I love that. Choice ready. Basically, Bryce will be able to go to college if he decides so, go to advanced training if he decides so. But because of his training here at Ulster BOCES, he'll actually be able to go out into the workforce and be successful. So we call them young professionals because that's what they are. When they leave us, they can actually go into a profession. Does that make sense to folks? Okay. I hope so. Maybe you guys should consider using that language too. It's pretty cool. We have 26 programs. That includes New Visions, which is a one-year senior program. It includes our P-Tech school. We also have a Phoenix Academy, which is an alternative high school for overage under credit. Those young professionals actually take a career and tech program as part of their schedule. We serve 8 component school districts, and our website is there. You can check it out if you'd like at your leisure. All right, so what do we do? What you see on this screen is what we do. We serve young people to get them ready to be employable. That's our main focus here, okay? Our data shows that we have extremely positive academic results, but it shows more than that, that we have really positive employability results. These young people are ready to go to work. They're assessed on their employability. There's an employability profile that follows them from their junior year through their senior year. And it also is a situation like if Bryce is going to go out on an internship, he needs to assess against our employability readiness assessment, as does his instructor, right? And then that gets shared with the business partner. So it's a really good system. I'm sure many of you guys use something similar. So these are just some photos of some of our young professionals, our amazing young people that are out there in the field, and some of the different events that we do here. Workplace learning at Ulster BOCES, this is a little bit of a breakdown. If you look in the center, that's the key. The stuff around the outside serves that center, okay? And we're going to be talking a little bit about partner engagement and support today. But the bottom line is if we have employability and we build really strong relationships, if we focus on employability and build strong relationships with partners, we're giving Bryce and every one of these young people a choice when they leave. That's far different than the traditional American high school model, okay? The American high school model, I say this all the time, sometimes I get in trouble, but that's okay. I've been getting in trouble since I was a toddler. But the American high school, as we know it, is set up really to try to get young people ready for, well, how about I don't answer? How about somebody shout out? How many years, you can come up from mute, how many years does the American high school, is it set up to prepare young people for? How many years of their lives? Somebody shout it out. Except for people who work at Ulster BOCES and have heard me like say this 1,000 times. Anyone? Bryce, how many years is the American high school, like onto your high school, the way it's set up, how many years are they, what are they preparing you for? Mostly.
Just to get out of high school.
Just to get out of high school, right? And what is the, and what's the big goal and the big data point that they care about?
Graduation.
Graduation, right? And the focus is to try to make sure you get your 21 credits and pass your 5 regions so you can go to college, right? That's the bottom line, right? 4 years of your life. Well, folks, do you know how many years you work? I think most of the people on this call do. About 46, which calculates out, folks, to 96,860 hours. Approximately almost 100,000 hours of your life is work. That's what we're working on, preparing these young people to be able to have choices and be ready to go to work. I hope this makes sense to you folks. And now we're going to dig in a little bit. The foundation of strong advocacy programs, right? Because if we don't build out our advocacy, we're never going to be able to help Bryce and the other over 1,300 young people get what they need and what they want. And the way we do that is by developing partnerships with industry partners and community partners, so that we actually have not just this really interesting building in the middle of Port Ewan, New York, and you know, an incredible 75 staff members that care about these kids, but we have an entire community that's behind these young people, okay? And when we get those industry partners to be engaged, that starts to allow us to advocate for these young people, right? These young professionals. And we'll tell you a little bit more about that as we move along. So this is an important thing that I'm going to chat with you guys about. And the reason we start with the partner engagement piece is because you have to have it in order to create advocacy. I'm sorry, you're not going to get very far with your advocacy plan if you don't have partners engaged. And when outside partners, because the bottom line is the people who are the influencers, you know, it's going to be a little bit tricky for them to listen to us as educators, but it's a lot different if some of the outside influencers in the community are involved. So partner engagement, this is it. It's about WIFMs, right? When you're building partnerships, you need to try to focus on the what's in it for me to the partner, right? And if you look at this slide, you'll see that we have done a lot of work on this, and we know that there are two main benefits, right, that get partners engaged. The altruistic, which is from their heart, and you can see every single thing that's on this slide is about them feeling good about themselves and being a part of it, caring about their community, caring about kids, caring about their schools, right? But everybody on this call knows that those people are very busy. They run businesses. Those businesses pay the salaries and fund their families and their lives and their children. So if we're just going to go down the altruistic lane, we're not going to get them to commit to the sustainable levels that we need. So we have to recognize the importance of the financial benefits of engagement with us. Okay? This is it right here. If you can get them in, if you can tug at the heartstrings to get to the purse strings, I know you've probably heard that term before, that's the major golden ticket for partner engagement. Getting them to believe because they care about their community, right? But getting them some value add and some return on investment. And those financial benefits are what we're talking about. Does this make sense? Does there anybody have any questions about this or anything that they'd like to add to this? You know, wide open floor for you folks. I tell you, Saf, we got a quiet group today. Nobody? Any input, questions, comments? All right, hopefully.
Not seeing anything in the chat right now, but yes, they're a little quiet today.
All right, you know, you don't have to be. It's just, you know, we're just hanging out together. It's beautiful. Excuse me, I'm gonna take some water. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide and we'll chat a little bit. We have a structure of partner engagement here that we work on. And if you look at it, it really is a continuum, right? And what it does is it kind of serves us to make sure that we're creating the levels of engagement and the levels of partnership that can help us with this advocacy and with the work that we're going to do. And we're going to get into really defining advocacy in a little bit. So basically the way we structure, let's go to the bottom one first, these program advisory boards, okay? We have 26 programs, but 21 trade areas, okay? So we have 21 individual advisory boards of industry partners in those trade areas that meet twice a year, sometimes more, depending on need, to support these programs at the ground floor level, okay? So in the aviation program, we have a number of businesses that are related to aviation. They come, they get engaged, they work with Ms. Dickerson to help her with her curriculum, to help make sure that Bryce has access to flight training, right? Which is really cool.
We also do drones.
Yeah, you're right over here. How often do you go to flight training?
We can go up to 3 days a week.
Up to 3 days, yeah.
And then plus weekends.
Yeah, weekends. So they're connected with the flight training. They can actually go during school. And that's because of the advisory board connection that supports them at the programmatic level. The next level of these cluster steering committees, and like most career and technical centers, we're in clusters, and these cluster committees are a little different. What we do is we kind of dig in a little bit more on on some of the overall workforce and economic development issues that are being faced by that industry, right? Everybody knows that electric vehicles are becoming a huge part of our world, and we have businesses that are moving into the area, battery manufacturers. We need to be able to service those folks with assets, and those assets are these young professionals that are going to be able to go out and get work with them. It's also really cool because basically they're able to help us understand from a more global level on the direction things are going, how many jobs there'll be, where the colleges are, they help us in the support. On the top level is the strategic planning committee or executive committee, and that's just really working on the strategic plan and the vision for Ulster BOCES and how it fits into the economic landscape. And I know I'm talking about economic development and economic landscape and all this stuff over and over again. Well, that's because every single person that works in a career and tech center, they're economic developers, because the outcomes that we get here affect the economy, the local economy, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we dig into some of the data I talked to Bryce about. So now let's talk a little bit what advocacy. Is there anything in the chat we need to know about, Dana or Saf? No? Are they telling me to slow down because I speak too fast?
We had one question. Have you rolled out PD for your teachers on this so that it is a whole school effort and not a mindset that only lives in WBL?
Wow. Yes. So the answer is here at our Career and Technical Center. This work-based learning is actually at the top of the pyramid of everything that we do. So our teachers, our staff understand this, understand how it fits into the betterment of their program, and they actually participate in it from that standpoint, right? So yes, we've done PD. They understand the language. They understand how we're pushing this out. And they also understand the why, which is really important, right? Every one of our teachers understands the outcomes of the focus. And this work that we're talking about on partner engagement, getting them engaged, getting them to understand advocacy is important. You're going to see something a little bit later in the presentation that's going to kind of show you what one of the outcomes has been for us, because we've taken this, because of this, the value of this to our BOCES, and how it's affecting our community. I hope that answered the question. Okay, so advocacy. What basically the definitions, we want to change things, right? We want to, it's just moving from what we know to what we really should know, right? Or what we should be. And there's a real challenge around language, right? Between advocacy and lobbying. It's pretty simple. We can't lobby, okay? We can't lobby. There are people that get paid to lobby, okay? And they're the ones that actually go to those legislators and push them on taking a real position. What we can do is we can go and make them aware of our circumstances to be able to potentially influence their decisions on the legislation that we're talking about. Perkins, for example, WIOA funding, et cetera. We can actually go in there and show them data that we have and our needs and talk about how it benefits them in their constituents, right? But we can't be the ones that are actually pushing them on taking the position. That's lobbying. We're not allowed to do that. Okay. There are people on the circuit that actually do that work. And we'll talk a little bit about the National Policy Seminar and some of the folks that we met when we were at that event. And then, if you look at this other graphic here on the right, advocacy campaign tips, it's just understanding your goals, right? Building that plan. But this one in the middle is really, really important, right? Because if you don't show urgency, right? If you don't get that value add and that return on investment piece in there to show the benefit, you're not going to get action. The urgency has to be the key, okay? And then everybody has to really understand their role in this. And don't be afraid to ask an expert for help. This is not easy work. It's not what we were trained as educators to do, right? But there are a whole bunch of people that do this that will be able to be happy, myself included, that would be happy to help to get folks to understand how to do the work. So I hope this makes sense. Any questions about this thus far? Okay. Bryce, is this making sense? All right, good. As long as it's making sense to Bryce, then I think I'm in good shape. So, okay, now we're gonna get a little bit of meat and potatoes for you. Important stuff right here, okay? If you look at this graphic here, this talks about the 3 levels of advocacy, okay? Individual, organizational, and institutional. You can read the bullets yourself, but I'm gonna kind of talk this through for you folks, right? You know, individual advocacy is fantastic, right? If you have somebody that believes in your program or believes in your issue, you know, it's great, right? But that's one person. And let me give an example for you. If Bryce is at a company, an aviation company in the area, and he really believes in Ulster BOCES, and he comes and he's a guest speaker and he wants to hire interns and he wants to be engaged, that's great, right? But guess what? Bryce just met somebody that lives in Colorado and he decides he's going to move to Colorado and get married and change his life. Guess what we just lost? We just lost our advocate, right? So the individual advocacy piece is very limited in what it can do. It's not, it's something we should always go after individual advocates, but what we need to do is try to push it up to that next level, which is organizational. This is when a company or an organization, right? Everybody on that company is on board. There's messaging and vision around the advocacy. There's messaging and vision around, in our case, our BOCES. But there's something that's tricky with that, and that's actually happened to us, where we had a company that was engaged. They loved us. They were hiring interns. Their people would come in and do work for us, and then they got bought out. And the other company, they had a policy that they weren't going to engage in this kind of work. So guess what we lost? We lost that advocate, right? But the bottom line is when you get to this 3rd level, this institutional advocacy level, this is when you have enough organizational advocates, right, and individual advocates, that this becomes like a movement in your community, okay? This becomes something that's expected, okay? Right now, there are a number of businesses, the majority of our real partners here, that expect the outcomes and the return and the value add from what we do with our programs here at Ulster BOCES, okay? And what that does when we get to that institutional level is that's when that group actually become influencers, okay, on an issue. I'm going to give you an example. I told you I worked for NAF a number of years ago, and I did work in Hartford, Connecticut. And it was great work. We brought career academies to Hartford. We started with 5. We grew to 10. It was amazing. Superintendent who believed in it. You know, we knew he was going to be retiring in a couple of years, but we built such a strong board of advocates that it was to the institutional level that when that superintendent left and retired, that board was engaged in influencing, ensuring that the new superintendent that they were hiring was going to continue the work. Okay, that's institutional advocacy at its finest. When you have an expectation and influence from people outside working together with the schools to support the mission and the vision. I'm going to stop for a second because I do know that this is a little bit of a big topic, and I just want to throw it out to you folks to ask if you have any questions about this or anything that you want to add to this, because this is a very, very important topic, and it's really important to understand these 3 levels of advocacy. Anybody have anything that they want to ask or add? What if I gave you a candy?
I'm not seeing anything new in the chat.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Jen. It's nice to see you. Everybody.
I'll add something, Stephen. I
Thank
love
you.
that you have these different levels. I think that we've all seen it at these levels. If it's just us and we're like doing all the things, we're
Yeah.
gonna get burned out really fast.
Yep.
But I think and maybe this is I had to step out, so maybe you've said this already, but I think in order to get to these other levels, people really have to know what we're doing. So if we're not talking with other people about what we're doing,
Right.
and they know, then there's no way to get them on board with us to help us advocate.
Yeah.
So often when I'm talking to people, and this has actually just happened in the last few weeks, is like, we didn't even know you were here. How can we help? And then let's get on and do this. I'm like, okay, well now you know, and let's go.
I'm so glad that you brought that up because you have to make, I'm so glad you brought it up because you really need to be intentional about this, right? And you need to be intentional about bringing this out to people outside of your building, right? So a little bit later on, there's a slide. I have a little video that you guys can look at your leisure, but I'm going to show a very small portion of it. And this was when our Skills USA young professionals actually presented on advocacy to our local politicians. And do you want to know what the title of the presentation was? Ulster BOCES, the best kept secret in Ulster County, right? And it speaks directly to what you're talking about, Jen, right? Like, so when people drive by Ulster BOCES, what are they don't know what this is, right? Because basically, we're not in the center of the village of Kings, the city of Kingston, right? So we have to get out there and push that, right? And that, when we talked about partner engagement before, folks, right? We talked about those levels of partner engagement. We talked about those advisory boards, and we talked about engaging outside partners. They become the advocates. They become the folks that make up these three levels of advocacy, right? So Jan, you're right. If we're going to sit here and just do school, we're not going to have advocacy. We're not going to have movement. We're not going to have real change and a real push for support. But when we open that up and we get these industry partners who are engaged, just a quick example, the Workforce Development Board here in Ulster County, the president of the Workforce Development Board is on our strategic planning committee. He's also on a steering committee for our P-Tech school, right? He's an influencer because every month he meets with the Workforce Development Board. We go in and we present, we're at chamber meetings, we're always out there pushing the value add to businesses. And folks, this is an interesting thing too about it, because you honestly have to be comfortable with sales, because that's what it is. Like you have to and look at Saf's eyebrows just went up. Whenever somebody mentions sales, people get nervous. No, because we sell all the time. When I picked this shirt and tie out this morning, right? I picked it out because I thought it looked good. And I thought people would think it looked good. I hope you guys think it looks good. But the bottom line is what it made me feel is it made me feel good, right? So this is the sales piece that we have to understand, and we need to be comfortable having these conversations outside. And once we build those relationships with those partners, we need to be comfortable asking them to make sure they're talking about us at their association meetings. We got to ask them to go to school board meetings in the component districts. And we've had them do that because we've been able to build institutional advocacy with them. Folks, does that make sense? Just give me a thumbs up or something, or, an emoji or, or anything. I mean, this is the work, right? This is the work. We have to be the ones that are out pitching this to folks, and we have to be comfortable with that. The ACT Work-Based Learning Conference, last year, Jason Van Nuss, who's on the policy committee with me, he's amazing. He and I actually did a presentation on how to sell, right? Because we're not comfortable with selling. We have to be comfortable with selling, right? Of course, we related it to the product, right? Which is our work. And we're going to actually try to do a follow-up at the upcoming WBL conference if everybody approves our presentation. I hope they do. But yeah, Jen, you're right. And folks, just dig in on these three levels, right? Because we're going to actually ask you guys to do something with that a little bit later. Okay. I just saw something else come in the chat. Is there anything we need to touch on there, Seth?
So somebody was just commenting that sometimes it's people in your own district that don't understand what CTA teachers do. And I think we've all experienced that.
Yes, but check this out. You want to know what the best way to get through that? See that guy right there? Right? Everybody serves that guy right there. So if we can make sure that we're highlighting and focusing on the things that Bryce is doing and what our young professionals are doing to our community and our schools, it's impossible not to be fascinated by this, right? You know what I mean? Like, that's the logic behind this. And you're right, Sept, and whoever put that in the chat, we also need to sell it inside of our districts, right? Right. But I want to also mention to you that you have some helpers out there. When you get influencers and business partners engaged, they're able to have some of the conversations up the ladder that some of us can't based on our position. Okay. You know, look, I'm a supervisor of workplace learning. I'm middle management, right? You know, I'm a really good salesman and I have great relationships, but the bottom line is my superintendent needs to be the one that's talking to the county executive, right? I mean, I saw the county executive at an event yesterday. We were at a chamber event yesterday. We have a great relationship. She knows me. She's excited about our work. But when it comes to strategy and getting the county executive behind us, I can't have those conversations. It has to come from the superintendent level. So we have to go up and down the ladder about that. I hope that helped answer that question or that concern. Anything else in the chat before we go on? No, good. Okay, so this is a really good graphic here, folks, because what it does is it kind of takes this advocacy piece that we were talking about, and it looks at it from a transactional to a strategic model, right? And this is where we start to talk about sustainability. You know, if you look at what you're seeing on this, you know, programmatic advocacy is really trying to fill the gaps, right? And have some individual impact. That's transactional. It's a one-time thing. Somebody, like I said, leaves, you lost them, right? But when we move into the strategic side, we're looking at system change. And then when we get that at level 4, literally changing the game, not just changing the system, the school system, the way we do things, but changing the game in the community, right? Look at this human capital development, job matching, credentialing. This is it. This is when we get to some real heavy levels. If you look at it in the advocacy side, from the transitional advocacy piece, business as a corporate citizen, that's the altruistic, right? To strategic, where they're actually pushing our agenda all across the county, all across the region, all across the area. Great graphic. Please refer back to it. Any other questions before we ask you guys some questions? Anything else in the chat? No? All right, cool.
Not seeing anything in the chat right now.
All right, great. So here's the deal. Look at this slide, folks. So when Saf and myself and Dana were meeting beforehand, I had this slide all set up, and it was set up differently. But I said, you know what? Let's have you guys tell us what these examples, which these are. So there are 3 examples here, right? And we want you to let us know, and you can put it in the chat. I'll read it out, and please put it in the chat. Which level of advocacy, individual, organizational, or institutional, each one of these are. So the first one, you ready, folks? This is interactive. So we should see 20 something responses in the chat. Okay, the first one, I'm Jane, business partner. I love this program, and I've gotten more people from my organization to love it too. Is that individual advocacy, organizational, or is it institutional? I'm going to open the chat so I can see your answers. Oh, thanks, Michelle. You're very true. We appreciate that. All right, so we got 2 votes for organizational, 3 organizational. Wow, look at this. You guys get it. I'm loving this. What do you think, Bryce?
Organizational.
Pretty good group?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, good. Bryce, why is it organizational? What's the situation with that?
Because they're a business partner and they're actively trying to help the program. And
Right. Yeah, and it's the whole company
Right,
that's
yeah.
involved. Yeah, which is really important, but that can be transactional. It's not where we really need it to be. Okay. All right. Next one. I'm Joe, business partner. I love this program, so I'll help out as I can. Is that individual, organizational, or institutional? Put it in the chat. There you go, Tammy. Individual. Good. Saf knows. You know why? Because she got an advance on this before when we were meeting. Right. Everybody, you guys get this, right? This is one person. They love it. They're going to do what they can. It's great. We'll take it, right? But the level of impact is different. And of course, this last one, we know that this is institutional, right? Because that means it's institutionalized in our community. We, the Ulster County community, believe in the value of this program and expect it to be a part of the fabric of the community. They're looking at us, right? Or your school or your center as something that actually helps build and develop the community and economic development. Make sense? All right, cool. Thank you guys for participating in that. All right, what do we got? About 20 minutes left, so we're gonna go 15 because I want to leave it open for questions. But this is a quiet group. We might not get much out of you guys. Oh, by the way, this gentleman, you see the circle? I'm making a circle with the mouse. Remember I told you the Workforce Development Board, he's the president of the Workforce Development Board, right? What you're seeing here, hold on, let me go back. What you're seeing here in this photo is these are our P-TECH kids who actually they do these work-based learning challenges, and Joe and his dad, Jim and his dad, Joe, actually gave them a real problem that their company, Elna Magnetics, was facing. And the young people then took that problem, took some time to solve it, then went to Elna, got a tour, and actually presented their solutions as if they were consultants, right? And they were real solutions that the business actually used. So did Jim become more of an advocate and a believer in us because we actually were a value add to him? Of course, right? Next webinar on the 21st, we'll talk to you about some of the specifics on how you can do the same thing we did. Okay, cool. So now I'm going to kind of breeze through this really quickly because this is the important stuff that we use, the data that we use when we're out there talking about our programs from the economic development perspective. We don't talk about our programs from the school perspective. We talk about our programs as they affect our economy, as they affect our community, okay? And we made this presentation, the same one that you're looking at, to the new economic development director for Ulster County, and it changed everything with respect to the way we do business with him now, right? So this is the presentation. These bullet points talk about data, numbers, real numbers that we're able to talk to folks about to show the value add of our BOCES to our local community, our local economy, okay? This same data is what Bryce is going to be using when he goes to speak with the elected officials in DC this weekend. This same data is the data that myself and our assistant director of career pathways programs spoke with our elected officials about when we were there in March at the National Policy Seminar for ACT. Here's where the real meat is. I want you to look at this slide for a moment. This is the slide that really, really captures folks. There's two, this one and the next one. Last year, right, I mentioned to you that we have 1,300 students. Last year, we had about 500 seniors, okay? 259 of those seniors had internships last year. Now, of course, there's challenges with transportation, other issues, but 259 of our kids were actually outside of the building instead of being here in businesses last year, okay? 81 of those were in paid internships, okay? 81 were paid. So when we kind of break this down and show folks, you know, if you look at the growth in the total internships and you look at the growth in the paid 81 internships, and then we say to them, think about it from the business partner perspective, from the economic development perspective. Our kids are earning over $18,000 a week as employees in our communities. That's meaningful. That's powerful. That's the kind of stuff that industry partners and politicians want to hear about because it's economic development. Of course, we make the joke that we know that they're not putting it in savings accounts, that they're spending it, right? But logically, in an economy, they're actually, Bryce and his cohort are actual investors in the economy in Ulster County. That makes those outside partners want to play with us even more. And then when we calculate it out over the school year, we're talking about over $500,000 last year that our kids earned in their internships. How powerful is that, folks? Right? I want you to think about that. Do you, just a quick question, I'm going to look at this thing. Do you guys do this? Do you guys have this data, and do you use this kind of data, specific data about the impact of your internships and of the, you know, in your economy? Give me a thumbs up. And the Ulster BOCES people, you can't put a thumbs up because this is what we do. Anybody using data like this, real numbers to try to get folks to understand the value? Yes, Saf, that's what I'm talking about. I love it. Excellent. Anyone else? Okay, well, guess what? You all better start because this is the golden ticket, right? It's just logical. When you're able to have this kind of data, it really does matter. Okay, so let's look at the next slide. This is also a powerhouse slide, right? That we use all the time. And in fact, we're moving our career and tech center to a new facility next year. And we actually had the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona, here to do the groundbreaking with us, along with the New York State Education Commissioner, Betty Rosa. And we gave them this data and they actually used it, right? And they know it and they feel it and they talk to us about it. Think about this for a moment. We track our graduates. We had 522 graduates last year. We had 440 kids actually do the survey, which is amazing, right? 60% of our kids continue their education. They go to college or they go to advanced training. 28%, 127 kids go directly into the workforce. So what does that allow me to say? What does that allow our administration to say? We're the largest workforce development agency in Ulster County, period. I'm going to say it again. Because of these numbers, and I know you guys have similar numbers, we are the largest workforce development agency in the county, period. Nobody can deny it, right? So what that does is that gives us a seat at the table. Does this make sense? It's important for you to consider looking at this data, getting data like this, and using it when you're having your conversations. This data.
We did have a question in the chat. Sorry to interrupt, but
good.
I think this is important. Somebody asked, what practices did you put in place to start collecting data from this angle?
That's fantastic. Great question. So what we do is we survey every graduate at the end of the school year. Okay, every completer at the end of the school year. And what we do in the summer is we actually have staff members that reach out to these kids to follow up to see if they're still in the job, et cetera, et cetera. What I can also do is I'll put the survey that we put together into the presentation so that when this gets out to the folks, they can see the survey. You can copy the data. It's pretty simple. We ask these direct questions that you're seeing right here, and the kids tell us, and we're able to follow up on it to make sure we're at these levels, right? So that's how we do. We ask the young people, okay? They give us the response. We reach out. We have connections with business partners. We see these kids when they're out. I hope that answered the question for that person. It's intentional. Every single thing that we do is intentional, okay? We use Michelle Leonardo, we use a very, very basic, very simple Google survey. It's a Google form, and every teacher, they're responsible to have their young people do it. Of course, you know, they deal with kids. So I got to say, I'm pretty proud that we got 440 this year, because the year before we only got 236 responses out of 500, but the data looked the same, so it was a good sample. So Michelle, I hope that helps, and we'll get that survey out so that you guys can see it, okay? So does this make sense to everybody? You see the logic behind this? Cool. Here's some more stuff that we're able to say to folks. And we said this at our national policy seminar because we have the data, right? We said this to our elected officials when we were in DC. Bryce is going to be saying these things to our elected officials in DC. We say them to our local elected officials, right? Look at those internship numbers and then look at this growth, our goals and our growth. You can't deny this, right? As we build out and as our enrollment increases and we move to iPark, to this new facility, we're going to have more young people that are going to be in our programs, graduating our programs. And that 28%, 30% data, that doesn't change, right? Because when you have good data sets, you're able to always kind of go back and use it. It's proven, you know, every year when we get this data, we know that those are about the numbers, around 60%, around 28%. Okay. So having this stuff and having it and being armed and ready with it, right? Excuse me, I shouldn't use that term. Having it ready at the tip of your tongue to be able to talk to these elected officials and recognize that this is the stuff that matters to them, right? Because an elected official, their goal is to make sure that they're having an impact on the economy so that they can get elected again. This is the truth, folks, right? So all of those constituents, oh, by the way, we'll talk more about this in November. There's something called the Congressional CTE Caucus. Bryce is going to learn about that when he goes to DC. It literally is one of the only completely nonpartisan caucuses in DC. CTE is a nonpartisan issue. It's one of the only things that they agree on, right? So if you look at this data and you think from a perspective of an elected official, these numbers matter because it's economic and community development. Okay, there's an organization called the Alliance for Excellent Education. Go to their website, allfored.org, I think it is, and they actually have data sheets for communities that actually show the impact of outcomes of high school kids, college kids, and how it affects the economy. Knowing this stuff and being able to have this ready really, really does matter. Okay, this is something that we also use in our presentations. We actually we map out where all of our partners are. Okay, it's a Google map. It's pretty simple, right? So all of these places are where all our kids are on internships, where our partners are, and we also use this when we meet with our industry partners. Okay, so pretty simple thing to set up. Your IT folks or a kid could set it up because basically it's Google. It's not too hard. Okay, so I'm not gonna, we don't have enough time for you guys to see this presentation, but this is this student advocacy presentation that 3 of our Skills USA young professionals gave to Pat Ryan, who was then our county executive, now is our congressman. Take a look at it. It's about 4 minutes long, but the bottom line is all these young people were doing, they were talking about the same things that I'm talking about and that Bryce is gonna talk about to be able to get Pat Ryan and our elected officials to understand the value add of our BOCES. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Oh, wow.
Good morning and welcome to all the BOCES.
How do I stop this one? Okay, good. How do I get out of this now? Question. All right, hold on, folks. Give me a moment. All right, cool. So real quick, there's the last thing we're going to do, and then I'm going to give you some resources. I want you to do me a favor, right? And I want you to think about your program. We're not going to do all of this, right? You think about your program, and would you please, in the chat, think about where you stand on this continuum, your program. Is individual advocacy where you guys are at? Is it organizational? I'm talking about the majority of it, right? Or are you at that point where you really have institutional advocacy? I'm very curious. I'd like to see, just put the number in the chat, please. Excellent, Jan. I love it in Utah. We're going to push. We're going to get to the number 3. Shelly, we're going to move from 1 to 2 because we have to have incremental growth before we can have growth. 2.65, Saf. Are you a math teacher or something? That's awesome. Yes, working toward a 3. Great, Jan. We got to work forward. Good, good. This is great. And Chris, oh, wow, Christy, I'd love to have an offline conversation with you. I'd love to learn more about the institutional advocacy that you guys are doing out there. All right, yeah, I mean, you guys kind of get the idea, right? So like what we have to do is we have to kind of move from one to the next, right? And we have to make it our business to have the data and the important stuff that's going to resonate with these outside folks, right? So this is, there's a Menti here, right? If you could, it's 3 ways to get on it. There's a code. You can click on two ways, click on the link, put in the code, or just do the scan. And if you would, just say, what am I going to commit to? Like, are you going to try to get data? Like, am I going to, try to move from a 3 to 2 to 3? Am I going to talk to elected officials? Am I going to come up with professionals? Throw some things into this Menti. While you're doing that, we have a number of advocacy resources that ACT has, and these are some other things I've found. This will be available to you folks. I think they're going to put it in the chat and also be in the presentation. Okay, really great stuff. ACT has such great stuff. And put in for the National Policy Seminar as soon as you see it. You should come to DC. It's phenomenal. You get great opportunities. Plus, I know all the great food places, and I'll tell you where to go eat. I'm a big foodie. And then the bottom line is when we do this work, everybody wins, right? Every stakeholder wins, but most importantly, this guy wins. And every young person that's in your school, this is so cool. I don't know how, it's like a plant. I'm so glad he walked in. Thank you so much. Yeah. But the truth of the matter is, if we do this work, and those 1s become 2s and those 2s become 3s, right? These young people are going to have more opportunities and more advantages. right? And it's going to change their lives, right? So if advocacy is a scary thing, don't let it be. It's about data. It's about understanding how to make your pitch and making that pitch. I promise in November, when we do this webinar, we'll get to the nitty gritty and down and dirty on actually how to make those pitches, how to build these things out. I hope that's of value. I want to thank you guys so much, for spending some time with me. And we got 4 minutes left. Is there anything in the chat, any questions, anything we need to know? And I know, Saf, I know you want to end with something. All right, Saf, I guess take it away since we don't have any questions.
So I think we have, the links are going up in the chat, and I think that is most of what I'm seeing right now, and some thanks. But we do have a couple of little things to wrap up. I did want to put up, and I apologize for scrolling through these. I did want to put up a registration link for the follow-up webinar that will be happening on November 21st. So if you want to catch that, you can take a screenshot here real quick, or get your phone out and get ready to follow that link. We also have a link for our event in October. On October 17th, again, we're going to be doing a no tricks, only tips and treats. We're going to be doing a resource share. So we need you to help us by providing resources for us to share with one another. And we'll also have some hosts that will be sharing a good number of resources too. So it should be fun. It should be good things for all of y'all to check out. And then the link to our calendar of events. So if you would like to take a little screenshot of that, that can pull down the links to register for all of our calendars. Well, all of our events on the calendar. Other than that, we just wanted to thank everyone. Thank you, Stephen, very much for joining with us today, for sharing your expertise about advocacy and for giving us a start on that. We look forward to our next session in November, on November 21st, to take this discussion a little further. If you have any suggestions about upcoming topics, you can feel free to email me. And thank you, everyone, for joining with us today.
Thanks to Bryce for being a really great resource and a great advocate.
Special guest. Always great to hear from the students.